The Vatican walls have heard secrets, but none as tender and shocking as this. In the twilight of Pope Francis' life, something extraordinary happened. A final whisper. A fragile breath. Words he spoke, not to a cardinal, not to the world, but to his nurse. These last words pierced through the gold and marble of the Church into something far more eternal: love, guilt, and an unspoken truth. But that's not all. There's something deeper, a secret going back to Pope Leo XIV, one that the Orthodox Patriarchs quietly recorded, and that the Vatican may have tried to hide. In this video, we expose what Pope Leo XIV tried to cover, unravel what Pope Francis revealed on his deathbed, and connect it all in a heart-wrenching, eye-opening revelation that will change the way you see the Church forever. White right pointing backhand index. Subscribe for more godly truth and rare historical insights they never preach on Sunday. Chapter 1, The Final Room, when the nurse entered. It was a silent room. Dimly lit. No golden throne. Just a hospital bed and the world's most powerful religious man, Pope Francis, barely able to speak. The nurse, a humble woman named Elena, had seen many final moments, but this was different. As she took his hand, he whispered something that shook her to the soul. "Tell them. I tried. I failed them. But I loved them all." Elena later testified, these weren't random words. Pope Francis wasn't referring to just people, he meant the flock, the Church, the Orthodox, the forgotten unity. Behind this gentle phrase was a centuries-old burden. A guilt passed down from popes before him. One name kept coming up, Pope Leo XIV. What did Leo do? Why was Pope Francis thinking about him before he died? Elena asked the Pope, "Your Holiness, who did you fail?" His eyes welled up. He simply replied, "Bartholomew, and the promise." This name, Bartholomew, wasn't just a friend. He was the Orthodox Patriarch, a key to an ancient unity the Church was supposed to protect. Pushpin subscribe to uncover what promise he meant. The next chapter may shake your faith, in the best way. Chapter TWO, The Promise Between Popes and Patriarchs. In the archives of the Vatican, buried under layers of forgotten oaths, there exists a document known only by insiders as the Unity Accord. It's believed to be a secret promise once made between the Orthodox Patriarch and the Pope of Rome, dating back to the 19th century. Pope Leo XIV was the one who signed it, and he also buried it. The document allegedly promised that by the year 2000, both branches of Christianity, the Orthodox and Catholic, would reunite under a shared table, preserving their unique practices but standing as one body of Christ. But Pope Leo XIV feared backlash. Political tensions with Eastern Europe were peaking. The Roman Catholic Church had too much at stake. So, rather than expose the unity, he sealed the deal in silence, never to be fulfilled. Pope Francis, in his final hours, was haunted by this failure, not his alone, but the inheritance of a broken vow. This was the weight on his chest as he whispered to his nurse. He knew the world deserved to know. Chapter 3, Pope Francis and Patriarch Bartholomew, a secret friendship. Unlike any of his recent predecessors, Pope Francis had a deep, almost brotherly bond with ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew I of Constantinople. They exchanged letters not for diplomacy, but for healing. For over a decade, the two discussed not theology, but how to undo the damage done by Leo XIV. They called it Project Olive Branch. They dreamed of a public declaration of unity. But there were enemies. Inside and outside the Vatican. Powerful cardinals warned Francis. If you break tradition for unity, the Church will split again. This terrified him. So, he chose silence. But his heart never agreed. His nurse later shared that in the final hours, he clutched a small note. It wasn't a prayer. It was a personal letter from Patriarch Bartholomew, thanking him for trying. Francis cried. And whispered. "Tell him. I'm sorry I didn't do more." Orthodox cross # the Orthodox world had a friend in Rome. But time ran out. Chapter 4, The Message Hidden in His Bible. After Pope Francis passed, the Vatican nurse Elena noticed something strange. Tucked beneath his pillow was a Bible, but not just any ordinary one. It was old, faded, and filled with personal notes in the margins. Inside the book, near John 17, the passage about Jesus praying for unity among his followers, was a handwritten message from Pope Francis. It read, "Let them be one, as you and I are one. I kept this hope alive, but forgive me, Lord, I could not finish the bridge." It was emotional, powerful, and unmistakably sincere. Vatican aides were instructed not to publicize the note, but Elena took a photo before it was locked away. The words speak of a man who had reached the end, not of his life, but of his fight for unity between Catholics and Orthodox. Beneath the message was a reference, Leo XIV, see Archive Box 23B. That box, according to secret Vatican logs, belonged to Pope Leo XIV, sealed and restricted since 1903. It is rumored to contain correspondence with the Orthodox Church, specifically regarding a failed unity initiative Leo XIV allegedly shut down. This link between Pope Francis and Leo XIV was no coincidence. Francis had been trying to revive a unity Leo buried. That old Bible, now hidden from the public, was his last stand, a call not for power, but peace. Package Chapter 5, the Vatican letter he refused to send. The story of unity was not one of apathy, but of fear. According to close sources inside the Vatican, Pope Francis once drafted a formal letter that would have shaken the Christian world. In it, he acknowledged the Orthodox Patriarch as a spiritual equal and proposed a 2025 Unity Council, commemorating 1,700 years since the Council of Nicaea. The document was titled, Frat Res Unum, Brothers, 1. In this letter, Pope Francis expressed that it was time for Rome to shed its pride, to recognize the apostolic succession of the East, and to ask forgiveness for the great schism of 1054. But the letter was never sent. Why? Pressure. Several cardinals, particularly those loyal to the Curia, warned of massive backlash. "You will spark a civil war in the Church," one senior official said. "Tradition will not forgive you." So, the letter was sealed and placed in the Vatican's diplomatic vault, never to be released. But Francis had kept a copy in his personal drawer. It said that the nurse found that draft, tear-stained, folded, and covered in handwritten prayers. He had prayed for the courage to send it, and yet never did. Pope Francis, for all his strength, died carrying the weight of that silence. Chapter 6, the Cardinal who tried to stop the unity. His name was Cardinal Matteo Luciani, one of the most conservative voices in the Vatican, often referred to as the Iron Cloak. He had long opposed Pope Francis' progressive outreach toward the Orthodox Church. "The East has its history. We have ours. Do not mix oil and water," he said in a private council. When Francis brought up the Unity Council proposal during a synod, Cardinal Luciani stormed out of the room. He believed such a move would undo the Church Fathers' legacies and blur the authority of the See of Peter. Luciani was more than a dissenter, he mobilized power. He reportedly lobbied others to oppose Francis behind closed doors, warning them that unity would mean compromise, and compromise leads to heresy. Sources claim that he intercepted one of the Pope's messages to Patriarch Bartholomew, delaying it for weeks. Though this claim was never publicly confirmed, Patriarch Bartholomew once subtly remarked, "Sometimes, the silence of Rome is not God's silence, but man's politics." Luciani saw himself as a protector of tradition. But Francis saw him as the greatest obstacle to healing. Before Francis died, he reportedly whispered to Elena, "He will protect the Church's body, but lose her soul." This painful division within the Vatican was not merely about politics, it was about theology, pride, and legacy. Globe showing Europe-Africa Chapter 7, the Orthodox Patriarch's reaction. When news of Pope Francis' death reached Patriarch Bartholomew, he was in private prayer. Upon hearing what the Pope had whispered to his nurse, and learning of the letter that was never sent, he wept. In a rare public statement during a divine liturgy, he said, "My brother Francis sought the unity of love over the pride of tradition. Though his hands are now still, his voice will live forever." The Patriarch also shared a personal letter Francis once sent him, a letter where Francis wrote, "If I fail, no, it was not for lack of love, but fear of what man would say." Bartholomew was heartbroken, but not bitter. He called for a special Orthodox service honoring the Pope who tried. And then, in a historic moment, he did something that hadn't been done in nearly a millennium. He requested that a candle be lit in the Hagia Sophia in honor of Pope Francis. This simple act carried powerful symbolism. The Hagia Sophia, once the heart of Eastern Christendom, now echoed with the silent prayer of unity. Francis, in death, had done what no council or committee had been able to achieve. He reopened the door of possibility. Chapter 8: Why Pope Francis Felt He Failed. Pope Francis was not a man who feared death. But he feared dying unfinished. His mission, he once said privately, was not just to reform the Church from within, but to heal its oldest wound, the split with the Orthodox Church. In his private confessions, recorded by his spiritual advisor, Francis said, "It is not enough to kiss the feet of the poor. If we ignore our brother in the East, we betray Christ's prayer." He constantly felt the pressure from those who urged him to wait, to preserve tradition, to avoid risking scandal. Yet deep inside, he knew that every delay was a denial. In his final weeks, Francis reportedly asked, "How many more popes will pass the baton? Will any of them run with it?" He felt guilt, not because he sinned, but because he stayed silent when his heart told him to roar. His nurse said he spent hours staring at a simple icon of Jesus with outstretched arms, Eastern style. He would touch the face of Christ and whisper, "Unite us." This was not political. It was spiritual grief. Candle Chapter 9, The Prophecy of the Two Churches. Pope Francis once referenced a forgotten prophecy attributed to an Eastern monk of Mount Athos in the 14th century. "A Western shepherd and an Eastern flame shall speak under one star, and the divided body shall breathe as one again." Francis believed this prophecy referred to the future union of the Catholic and Orthodox Churches. In his private letters, he wrote, "We are living under that star. But the shepherd is tired, and the flame is guarded too tightly." He dreamed of a symbolic act. One day, on Easter, the Pope and Patriarch would celebrate the resurrection together, even if just for one moment. He planned for it in 2025. But his death came early. Still, many now believe his efforts laid the foundation for that prophecy to come true. Bartholomew has already extended invitations to future popes. And some bishops are quietly reopening the conversation of shared communion. The dream is still alive. Chapter 10, The Final Confession, Pope Francis whispered to the Patriarch. It was late in the evening. The corridors of the papal residence were quiet, the air thick with a sense of transition. Those close to Pope Francis could tell something was weighing on him. A silence, deeper than words, had settled over him. Then came the moment, one that would go down in spiritual history. Pope Francis, weakened but aware, requested a private moment with Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, the symbolic head of the Eastern Orthodox Church. The request itself was unprecedented. These two men, leaders of two of the most powerful Christian bodies on earth, had often walked the line between unity and division. Yet now, in the dim light of the Vatican, they were simply two old men, two spiritual warriors facing eternity. The Pope's voice was low. "Brother, we started on the same road," he whispered, tears glistening in his eyes. "But along the way, Rome, we built walls where Christ built bridges." The Patriarch, deeply moved, leaned in. Pope Francis continued, "Tell the world, we must return to love. If there's anything I regret, it's not doing more to make peace between our churches. I hid behind doctrine when I should have embraced grace." The words cut deep. It was as if centuries of division melted for a moment. The Catholic Pope, in his last breaths, reaching out not in supremacy, but in sorrow, seeking unity with the East, not through power, but through humility. The Patriarch said nothing for a while. Then he nodded and responded, "God is watching. And what you just said will echo louder than all decrees of men." This confession, kept silent until now, is finally coming to light. Not through Vatican statements or public addresses, but through the eyes and ears of those who were there. Pushpin subscribe for more godly revelations like this. The story isn't over, it's just beginning.